Larissa, do you think that the British public, when they get polled on issues that are important to them around elections, defence generally comes in around sort of 9 or 10. Do you think the MOD has done a good job in relaying particularly what Russia is up to? So, for example, when we hear about the jets going down the North Sea, do they know they're actually doing a dry run, opening the bomb bay doors and practicing? Or do you think there's more that could be done to sort of, not educate, but to win the argument around defence spending and what we expect from the military?
So I think they've got a tougher challenge than departments, for example, like the health service, because obviously with the NHS, you've got members of the public going into hospitals. They know what the situation is like in the A&E. They know what the situation is like in doctors' surgeries, having to wait a week for an appointment. Whereas with defence, it's sort of not an everyday thing that they come across. It's an insurance policy, effectively, isn't it? Wanting people to invest in our defences. And I think the MOD do a lot with us. And one of the reasons that I do love my job is the access that we get and the deployments that we get to go on abroad. However, I've been covering defence since 2014, and I have never interviewed CDS or CGS, for example, and I obviously would like the opportunity to do that. And I think by allowing us to speak to these people, we can convey the sort of the rising threats and why people should want us to invest more money in defence. And I think without that, it makes it very hard to make the case for spending more money on the defence budget when you've got a crisis in the NHS.
Yeah. Deborah, what do you think?
I think that they're trying their best to get the message out. But over the past few years, there's been a real control over the message. So you have successive defence secretaries, and it really kind of started in the Labour years, really, and then sort of filtering through. You had Liam Fox, Philip Hammond, and then Michael Fallon. And particularly under Michael Fallon and Philip Hammond, there was this massive control over the chiefs and letting the chiefs talk, and really difficult blocking access to the media. And then whenever they gave a presentation, their speeches would be gone over with a fine-tooth comb. And I remember there was a chief of the air staff who gave a speech, I think Andy Pulford, and he gave a speech during the annual air conference, and it was a really good speech. I think he spoke off the cuff. He might have had a few notes, as you would expect. He's the chief of the air staff, and the story that came out afterwards was, he did say it. It was, I can't remember the exact example, but it was sort of talking about how militaries are constrained by what their politicians say, and how, in terms of how quick they can to respond to a crisis. And because it wasn't like a glowingly positive message, I think he got into a bit of trouble for it. And so it's a bit of a chilling effect.
Firstly, I'll just second what Larissa and Deborah have said in terms of access to senior chiefs, although I've been fortunate enough to interview some of the senior chiefs, including CDS, although last year I was particularly frustrated that in the year of the Royal Navy, First Sea Lord, to the best of my knowledge, I've never been counted on this, did a single interview with any media outlet. And I think it would help if they did speak publicly more, because I think the military's best advert is in their people, and I think that has to be led from the top. I think one of the problems at the moment is that with the British military not engaged in a large-scale deployment as it was with Afghanistan, the image of the British military fighting abroad is not on the front pages or in the TV bulletins in quite the same way. It is in a different way. It has morphed into more of a national security counter-terrorism type role at the moment, and I think events in Salisbury in the last few days have served to highlight a threat from Russia that was previously hard for some of us to understand. There's been a lot of talk about trying to win the war in the information space. I think for a lot of people that's rather nebulous. And I think what would be helpful to see is, if we are being told that the threat to this country is growing, and I think we're all in agreement that it is, how is it growing, where is it growing, and what precisely does this country need to do about it in order to defend itself better? So, for example, as one example, if it is deemed that we face a threat from North Korea, a very credible threat from North Korea, what do we need to defend ourselves?
Okay. And how does it compare to, in your experiences, I don't know if you've worked for other government departments or speaking to your colleagues, how does that access compare to, for example, health correspondence? Prime Minister's in committee. How does it compare to other departments? Do you know? Do you have any experience with that? Speak to your colleagues. Like everyone knows who Simon Steems is, right? If I go on the doors in Plymouth, people know who Simon Steems is. People don't know who, civil servants or chief of the air.
I'm not speaking out of turn here because I wouldn't say anything that they don't already know, and I've made it clear to the Ministry of Defence that I would like to have more briefings from them. I came up with a formal suggestion of one briefing a month for defence correspondents on a range of issues. And I think if you've got 12 months in a year, you could quite easily find 12 issues to brief us about. That is something that the Foreign Office do very well at the moment. That I've experienced or colleagues have experienced. I believe it's something that the MOD...
Who controls the access that these guys have to the media? Is it the Secretary of State's team, or is it the comms team within the MOD?
I think any senior engagement has to be sanctioned by the Secretary of State's team. It depends if under the previous Secretary of State, for example, he didn't like the stuff that the Times was reporting, and so that, I believe, made it much harder for me to get any access to anyone. Whereas under this Secretary of State, he seems to be much more willing to let the chiefs speak. I mean, the fact that a lot of the chiefs have been allowed to speak and do interviews over the last few weeks is a massive change compared to the last sort of 5 or 6 years even.
Yeah.
And I think that's really positive.
Okay.
I'd just say, comparing it to other departments, obviously I do sort of some of our political side as well, and I think the MOD is actually much, much better than most of the government departments that I deal with. And that's not to say that it's exactly where it should be and where we would hope it would be, but they're miles ahead. Yeah,
actually, and on just following up on that, in terms of the press office, we get, you go to them, I don't know how many questions they must get from different journalists.
They always come back.
But they always come back, and they always seem to try their best to get you the answer.
So on the whole, it's pretty good, but a little bit more access to service chiefs would be helpful.
Yeah,